All right. Well, today we're going to see if we can make it to Deuteronomy 10. Just a note about schedule. This is the last Sunday for the spring semester for Sunday school. So we'll pick back up on June the 11th. And then in terms of Wednesday night, those will return on June the 14th, Wednesday after Family Bible School. You'll see some stuff in the keys about that in about a week or so. So that's kind of what we're doing schedule-wise. Just a reminder about a couple things that we've looked at thus far. First, remember we took a look at Deuteronomy 7, and we looked at Israel's election and why that was so important. And by election, of course, I mean God choosing Israel, not people voting for something. And that's why Deuteronomy 7:6 and following was so key. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you to be a people for his treasured possession out of all the peoples that are on the earth. It was not because that you were more in number than any of the other people that the Lord has set his love on you and chose you, for you were the fewest of all the people, but it was because the Lord loves you and is keeping the oath that he swore to your fathers. So notice here that the rationale for Israel being an elect people is that they don't meet some sort of like criteria that God might have. The greatest of all the people, the smartest of all the people, the most religious of all the people, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That is, the choice of election is God, in effect, decides to love these people, and therefore he then acts out of loyalty and faithfulness to them. This will be important because, remember, this is where we're gonna take a look in Joshua in terms of how the people come into the land. And it's really important to sort of set a foundation, right? That, okay, look, the folks who currently inhabit the land of Canaan are not being sort of moved out of the way because you're like a superior people, right? You're like better than they are, and God's gonna like clear them all out and you'll be planted in their place. Rather, this is happening merely because you are God's elect people. So that's a really important emphasis. And then just to kind of recap one more thing before going on. Remember in Deuteronomy 8, we looked at God gives the rationale for the wandering in the wilderness. And I think it bears repeating. So in Deuteronomy 8:2, the people of Israel are asked to remember the journey through the wilderness. Remember, this is the generation that was born during the wandering of the wilderness. The original Exodus generation now has all died off. And so Deuteronomy 8:2 and following says this, "And you shall remember the whole way that the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, that he might humble you, and testing you to know what is in your heart, whether you would keep his commandments or not." And then this in 8:5, "Know then in your heart that as a man disciplines his son, the Lord your God disciplines you, so that you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God by walking in his ways and by fearing him." So really important word here, that is the testing in the wilderness took place to humble the people of Israel. And I know that sometimes the word humble kind of has can have a bad connotation, right? It can have a largely negative connotation, almost along the lines of, to humiliate someone is like to insult them. Here, what's the purpose clearly, right, is to take a people who kind of follow their own desires. We'll see this when we get into chapter 9. Who kind of follow their own desires, who kind of don't really have a clear sense of where they need to go or what they need to do, and who are sort of fall into this regular pattern of sort of like overestimating their own sense of judgment, right? In this sense, to humble means basically not to like humiliate, but to sort of like drag into reality, Okay, it's like, it's that point where, the person that thinks, they like know everything and, they've just graduated from college or something like that. And, it's their first job and they can come in and say, look, okay, I'm here, I just graduated from Stanford. I've come here to kind of straighten all you fools out, something like that. What this really is about is God attempting to kind of get the people of Israel to the point where they're responsive to him. So humility here is an important virtue, not in the sense that it indicates like you're like actively feeling bad about yourself. Rather, to be humble actually is to look at yourself sort of realistically, right? Well, who are we really, right? Well, we're a bunch of escaped slaves. Do we really know what we're doing? No. Do we exercise good judgment? No. Do we want the right things? No. Well, if that's the case, right, we need to exercise a little bit of self-restraint. That's humility, okay? And that's what God's trying to do here by taking him through the wilderness. And then we get this really important analogy that's made, that God's disciplining of Israel is like parental discipline. And I think that's a really important point, right? So that good parental discipline is not just about mere punishment, right? You broke the window, okay, now, you're grounded for the next 6 years. Good parental discipline, right, isn't just about punishment. Good parental discipline, right, is about instilling maturity, right? That should be the ultimate aim of all parental discipline, right? You're taking children and you're sort of like helping them to become mature and grow into like adulthood. That's what God's doing here with the people of Israel. He's not really punishing them. Okay, you did this, okay, so now I'm going to like wipe 10,000 of you out and that should teach you a lesson. No. The purpose of the discipline is to enable the people of Israel to grow and mature right under the law. So maturity here is a really important thing. You may think here about that really important passage in Ephesians 4, right? Where, remember what Paul's talking about us growing up into mature manhood, the measure of which is what? Christ. That is, Paul reminds people in Ephesus, right? Look, God's purpose here is to help y'all grow up into maturity, spiritual maturity. And the measure of that maturity is Christ. Same thing going on here. So I want to take one more step into Deuteronomy, and then we'll switch over into Deuteronomy 9. One of the really important things for Deuteronomy is the importance of remembering things. Remembering what's happened, remembering what God's done. And so in Deuteronomy 8:11, there's a kind of a really important warning. Take care lest you forget the Lord your God by not keeping his commandments and his rules and his statutes, which I command you today. This is Moses obviously addressing the people of Israel. Lest when you have eaten and are full and have built good houses and live in them, and when your herds and flocks multiply, and your silver and gold is multiplied, and all that you have is multiplied, then your heart be lifted up, and you forget the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery, who led you through the great and terrifying wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground, where there was no water, who brought you out of the flinty rock. So let's think about that. That's a really important statement here. I think we can say that for the book of Deuteronomy, one way that one could sort of characterize sin, if you want to kind of like find a one way to think about what sin is, for Deuteronomy, sin is the human tendency to forget about God, right? It's not that you like become an atheist or something like that, or set out to live like a deliberately immoral life and I'm going to do whatever I want. It's not that. It's actually something more subtle, right? It's that you sort of like forget about God. You forget about what he's done. And that leads to that leads to a certain mentality that Deuteronomy does a really good job of warning against. So, okay, here's what's going to happen, right? You're going to settle in the land, and then things are going to probably turn out to be pretty well for y'all, right? You're going to live in houses that you didn't build. You'll have vineyards that you yourselves didn't plant. And then you're going to find yourselves with a kind of certain level of prosperity and comfort and ease. You're going to look at the backyard, and there's the swimming pool, and you're going to look at the driveway, and there's a new BMW parked out there, and there's the new kitchen that you just spent several $100,000 redoing. You're going to kind of look at all that, and then you're going to say this, right? Then you're going to say, as you look upon all this stuff, well, look at what we've done. We've done pretty well for a group of escaped slaves, haven't we? My, oh my, oh my, look at us. You know? The danger right here, right, is, and this is why Deuteronomy thinks that forgetting God is so deadly, right? The accompanying feature, the thing that follows forgetting God, right, is that you again get a sort of false picture of what really your life is about. Right? Forget God, and the false picture that we get is, okay, well, gosh, life is about what we do. And if we've done stuff right, well, it's our hard work, clearly, that's done it. Right? I mean, think about, we could sort of sit back and look at the history of St. Peter's, from the day that we left St. John's and, made our way over to the other building at 901 Thomasville Road and then made our way out here. And we could say, well, you know what? For a group of people that left the Episcopal Church, we've done darn well. I mean, look at us. We left the church with nothing. And then we got kind of like a kind of semi-church that we kind of fixed up. And then we built a really nice church out in the kind of Tallahassee suburbs, and it's growing, and it's got a beautiful organ. And, I mean, look at us. We've done it, folks. Okay? I mean, it would be really, really easy to slide into that way of thinking, and that's what Deuteronomy is warning about. So for Deuteronomy, sin basically is this combination of forgetting God and kind of adopting a kind of a sense of self-sufficiency, right? That's kind of what sin is. And I think that that's a really helpful way, right? Because that's very subtle. Right? Once again, it's not like anybody's like become an outright atheist or they're like deliberately setting out to live an immoral life. It's more subtle than that. The temptation here is much more subtle, and Deuteronomy warns against it. The warning concludes with this little bit of wisdom in Deuteronomy 8:17. Beware lest you say in your heart, my power and the might of my hand has gotten me this wealth. You shall remember the Lord your God, for it is he that gives you the power to get wealth, that he may confirm his covenant that he swore with your fathers to this day. So there's another point here that we just want to grasp before moving on. Notice that there's a deadly consequence in forgetting God, and that's self-sufficiency. But then self-sufficiency brings with it another kind of deadly consequence, right? Forget God. Life then becomes about me and what I do, and then guess what happens after that? We begin to lose the ability to thank God because we thought we did it all, right? If we're running things, and if all the good things that have happened to us have basically resulted because of all the wonderful decisions that we've made, why be thankful to God? Okay, so this is really important. That is, the thing here is that Israel is never to get to the point where she imagines that her life has been kind of, like a story that she's written on her own. And that's why thanksgiving and thankfulness is so important, right? Thankfulness reminds the people of Israel, and of course it reminds the people of the church as well, right? That we're not self-sufficient. And actually, that the most important action in the world actually is not ours, but God's. And therefore, thankfulness is an immensely important spiritual discipline. Now, let's take a quick look at Deuteronomy 9. Once again, this is by way of warning as Israel's going to come into to occupy the the promised lamb. And once again, Moses, I think, kind of centers in on something that's really important, right? It's a point that some people don't like the Old Testament for this reason. It's actually quite good, and that is that Moses here kind of like tells the people of Israel the truth about themselves. That's really important. So notice what happens. This is Deuteronomy 9, 1 through about 7. Hear, O Israel, you are to cross over the Jordan today and to go in and possess nations greater and mightier than you, cities great and fortified up to the heaven, a people great and tall, the sons of the Anakim, whom you know and of whom you have heard it said, who can stand before the sons of Anak? Know therefore today, he who goes before you is a consuming fire, is the Lord your God. He will destroy them and subdue them before you. You shall drive them out and make them perish quickly, as the Lord has promised you. Do not say in your heart, after the Lord your God has thrust them out before you. So don't get to the point where you say this: it is because of my righteousness that the Lord has brought me to possess this land. Or as it is because of the wickedness of the nations that the Lord is driving out before you. Not because of your righteousness or the uprightness of your heart are you going in to possess their land, but because of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord your God is driving them out from before you, and that he may confirm the word that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. And now here's the truth part. Know therefore that the Lord your God is not giving you this good land to possess because of your righteousness, for you are a stubborn people. I'll come back to that word in just a minute. Remember and do not forget how you provoked the Lord your God to wrath in the wilderness. From the day you came out of the land of Egypt until you came to this place, you have been rebellious against the Lord. Even at Horeb, you provoked the Lord to wrath. And then Moses goes on to tell in sort of like great detail, and we'll take a look at this in a minute, the story of the golden calf. Okay, so let's think about this for just a minute. So, first thing, right? Now, once again, folks, right? Don't worry about the people who currently occupy the land. Yes. Is their civilization more advanced than yours? Absolutely. Do they have walled cities? Yes. Do they have advanced military far beyond anything you have? Yes. Are they an urban civilization? More y'all are a bunch of goat herders? Yes. Don't worry, because this battle really isn't about you. And it's not about you because I'm going before you. And I'm going to do the real fighting. Okay? All I need you guys to do is just to stay with me. Okay? That's all I want. Okay? Stay with me. And then Moses says this, it's really important to remember, right, that you are a stubborn people. So I want to dwell on this word for just a minute, right? So we've learned one thing about sin, right? One aspect of sin is forgetting God and becoming self-sufficient. Here we're getting at another dimension of sin. Sin can also be thought of as a kind of stubbornness in this sense, right? Israel's stubbornness takes the form of basically not listening to God. Okay? And as a way of making this clear, right? Moses basically kind of goes into his file of Israel's offenses and then kind of reads it. It's almost like a defendant being arraigned before trial, right? Where the prosecuting attorney kind of reads all the things that Joe or Mary are being charged with. That's what Moses does here. He kind of recounts all the incidents, right, where they've provoked the Lord. And the reason for the provocation basically comes down to one thing, right? They don't listen. Now, it's really important to kind of think about, right, what does that mean? Well, of course, it means a number of things, right? Stubbornness here means the refusal to listen, but of course, the refusal to listen presupposes, right, one, we don't need to listen because two, we already know what needs to be done, right? So stubbornness is a kind of posture not only where God's resisted, but also where one doesn't think one really needs to listen to what God has to say, right? So stubbornness here is a kind of, and we'll just want to remember right here that when we were going through the story of the Exodus, right, we saw one really important character who also revealed a level of stubbornness, and that was Pharaoh, right? So stubbornness here is a spiritual issue. It's the refusal to listen to God because one doesn't really think that one needs to do that, because one already believes that I already know the answers. We already know what needs to be done. And notice this too, right? The opposite of stubbornness is humility. The opposite of stubbornness is humility. So the people of Israel are being reminded here that they're stubborn, that they've provoked God again and again and again, and by provocation, right, we see what this is. And let's think about, we're going to think about the biggest one in just a minute, which is the golden calf, but we've seen this before. Remember, there was that wonderful incident in the book of Numbers where the people of Israel get to the point, right, where they decide basically to dump Moses, to elect their own leaders, and then to head back to Egypt, okay? And then this, of course, is a provocation, right? At a number of levels, right? Well, you know, yes, God did put Moses our leader, but we don't like him. He never tells us what we want to hear, right? He's always wanting us to do like hard stuff. So let's get rid of him. And let's get someone who will tell us what we want to hear. And then we're going to turn around and we're going to go back to Egypt, because as we all remember, right, Egypt was a really wonderful place where we were all happy. Okay? So the provocation right here is that it's ignoring God's purposes, right? God delivered them from Egypt for a purpose, and now they want to erase that and go back. So stubbornness here is clearly a really important issue. Now, then Moses goes into a rather extended account of the golden calf. I'm not going to read the whole thing just because of time. I will read part of it just so you can get a sense, or we can get a sense of what Moses is doing here. So we're at Mount Sinai, and I'm going to just jump in here at Deuteronomy 9:11. At the end of 40 days and 40 nights, the Lord gave me the 2 tablets of stone and the tablets of the covenant. Then the Lord said to me, "Arise, go down quickly from here, for your people, whom you have brought from Egypt, have acted corruptly. They have turned aside quickly out of the way that I commanded them, and they have made themselves a metal image." The really key part here of this is they have made themselves a metal image, which is the calf. Furthermore, the Lord said to me, "I have seen this people, and behold, it is a stubborn people. Let me alone, that I may destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven, and I will make of you a nation mightier and greater than they." So I turned and came down from the mountain, and the mountain was burning with fire, and the 2 tablets of the covenant were in my 2 hands. And I looked, and behold, you had sinned against the Lord your God. You had made yourselves a golden calf. You had turned aside quickly from the way that the Lord had commanded you. And I took hold of the 2 tablets and threw them out of my 2 hands and broke them before your eyes. And then I lay prostrate before the Lord as before 40 days and 40 nights. Neither ate bread nor drank water because of all the sin that you had committed in doing that was evil in the sight of the Lord to provoke him to anger. For I was afraid of the anger and hot displeasure that the Lord bore against you, and he was ready to destroy you. But the Lord listened to me that time also, and the Lord was also angry with Aaron that he was ready to destroy him. And I prayed for Aaron also at the same time. So two things here in this little recounting that we just want to notice because they're both, I think, really, really significant. Moses reminds the people of Israel, right, that it's not somehow that, only somehow recently has sin like crept into the life of Israel. Right? It's not like, the old story about, well, gosh, things started off really, really well. And then, unfortunately, we got like a bunch of bad people that got elected to the vestry, and that's when the whole church went off course. It's not that. Moses is making a really important point. Moses is making the point that from the moment that the people of Israel gathered at Mount Sinai to enter into a covenant with God, their lives reflected this stubborn rebelliousness. Right? And there was never sort of like a grand old time when everything was lovely. Things actually started out bad, and they just continued to be bad. That's what God's put up with. Okay? So notice what Moses says here. Moses says that he was up on the mountain, 40 days, 40 nights. He's received the 2 tablets of the law. And that's when God tells him, okay, Moses, emergency. You need to get down there because your people have gone like off the rails. And I think it's interesting that God refers to the people of Israel as Moses' people. They're your people, Moses. Go down and see what they're doing. And what they're doing is they've made themselves a graven image. So notice what's going on here. The people of Israel have decided sort of like on their own, right? Moses has been gone now for 40 days and 40 nights. Who knows what he's doing up there? Who knows when he's coming down? We need something to worship and hold us together now. So let's think a minute. What were some of the best things that we liked about the religion of Egypt? And somebody pipes up and says, my favorite god back in Egypt was the calf that we worshiped. Everybody goes, yes, the calf. I remember the calf. Wasn't worshiping the calf fun? Yes, it was. I have like several pictures of me in the calf temple. See, here they are. Look at my phone. And so, right, they make this golden calf and start to worship it. But the point here, right, is, once again, right, the thing that they decide to worship is something that they've made for themselves. The literal definition of idolatry, right? Idolatry is the worship of something that you yourself have made. Okay, so that's the first thing. But the second thing is more subtle, and I want to call your attention to it. Moses comes down the mountain, and he throws the tablets of the law down. And, sometimes this is depicted as Moses is like angry. And he throws the tablets. Basically, it's sort of like a kind of righteous temper tantrum, right? He takes the tablet. Well, if this is the way you're going to be, throws tablets down. They're all cracked, and he goes off, in a huff. I think that's wrong. I think Moses throws the tablets down to make a point. In making the calf and worshiping it, the people of Israel have broken the covenant. And Moses throws the tablets down as a way of representing that fact. Okay? They're thrown down because, look, you folks just basically broke the covenant that I just received on Mount Sinai. Okay? And then something really important happens. And this will probably be the last thing we'll be able to note. Notice, this is, I think, really, really significant. Notice what Moses does. He fasts for 40 days and 40 nights and prays on behalf of the people of Israel. And by the way, as he notes, almost kind of parenthetically, but importantly, he also prays for his brother Aaron, right, who was chairman of the Golden Calf Committee. So really important thing here, right? This is, I think, looking ahead to something significant in the New Testament. Moses is our kind of prototype, right? Moses here shows himself to be a kind of a figure that's getting us ready for Christ, right? In the sense that, notice Moses' first reaction to God's wrath for the people of Israel. He intercedes on their behalf. Moses, in effect, becomes the intercessor for the people of Israel. Now, I realize we tend to remember Moses as, a lawgiver, but we just want to remember that by the time that we get to the end of the book of Deuteronomy, we'll hear Moses being talked about as a prophet. As a matter of fact, Deuteronomy ends right with this lament. And never in the whole history of Israel has there ever been a prophet like Moses who spoke with God face to face. Never, ever, 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 until the New Testament. Okay, but that's on its way. But also too, Moses here kind of steps in to the intercessory role and prays on behalf of both the people of Israel and Aaron. Now, the thing we want to notice here, right, is, and this is important too, who has supplied this intercessor? God, right? God was the one who called Moses into this whole ministry in the first place. So Moses therefore becomes sort of like the God-appointed intercessor for the people of Israel. And that's why, fast forward a bit, right, when we get to the letter to the Hebrews, right, we'll have this proclamation of Jesus as the great high priest who was set over the house of God, who makes intercession for God's whole family. So we're getting prepared for this in the figure of Moses. One final thing, and this is where we'll have to stop. Some people, when you talk about the Old Testament, they'll say, "Oh gosh, I don't like the Old Testament. Don't think you should read it because God's like wrathful and judging, and He's always like smiting people and all kinds of stuff, and that's too depressing. I don't want to hear about that. I want to hear about love and mercy and kindness and all kinds of bright things like that." Well, this is where Deuteronomy 10 is really important. This is where we'll start during the summer, but just to kind of like preview of coming attractions. Simple fact. How does God respond to the fact that the people break the covenant by making this golden calf and by literally like returning to Egypt, at least spiritually, if not physically? How does God respond to the rebellion, the hard-heartedness, the stubbornness, and basically the apostasy of His own people? How does God deal with that? Well, as we'll see when we take a look at Deuteronomy 10, God's response to all this is to make a new covenant. Okay? Now, if that's not mercy, I don't know what is. Okay? If I were God, which I'm not, by the way, thank goodness, that's not how I would have responded to these people. Okay, but that's what God does. And so we're getting a real strong sense of God's mercy. And there we will have to stop or I'll be in hot water. There will be no mercy for me.